probably somewhere.
Why don't we,
I have not personally dealt with that.
pledge allegiance? Would you like to do this?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do a roll call.
Yes. Commissioner Brown? Here. Commissioner Kaczynski?
Here.
Commissioner Talley?
Here.
Commissioner Wu?
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Crandall? Absent. Vice Chair Blackwell?
Here.
Chair Brulin? Absent.
Okay. Special orders of business, special presentations, seeing none. We'll move on to the minutes.
I don't believe the minutes can be approved. I don't think you have a quorum.
Yes, we have the item A is minutes from regular study session meeting of September 4th, 2019, continued from October 2nd, 2019. We don't have quorum for that, so we're going to need to continue that item. Section B was minutes from the regular planning commission meeting of September 4th, 2019, continued from October 2nd, 2019. We do not have quorum for that either. And finally, item C, minutes from the adjourned regular planning commission meeting of October 2nd, 2019. We do not have quorum. And would anybody like to make a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion because we will be losing quorum that we advance item 8A in the agenda to be heard out of order right now, and then we'll proceed immediately after that with item number 6, oral and written communications, and then fall back in order.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second.
Okay,
Aye.
so it's moved.
Well, all those in favor?
All in favor, say
Aye.
it's moved. Okay, public item A, 8A, is 103 West Paseo de Cistobal, Cultural Heritage Permit 19-047, the Gordnier Edition.
And, Mr. Chairman, since this particular item is within my 500-foot brown circle limitation, I have to recuse for it.
Okay.
I will return after this is over.
Okay, that sounds great. Mr. Lightfoot, would you like to start your presentation?
Yes, I will. Good evening, Commissioners. The project I have in front of you this evening is for a residential remodel and addition at 103 West Paseo de Cristobal. The proposed project is a remodel and addition that incorporates about 926 square feet of new gross floor area into an existing single-family residence. A portion of that addition is a new master bedroom, bath, and a view loft on the second story. There's also a new rotunda-style entry. There will be a photo in a minute showing the proposed architecture. The existing building is a Spanish ranch hybrid with hip roofs, tan stucco, and S-tiles. The required entitlement is a cultural heritage permit. This project requires that entitlement because it is an addition greater than 500 square feet and it abuts a historic property. Across the street at 104 West Paseo de Cristobal is that historic property. Here's a location map that indicates those locations, the yellow arrow pointing to the project site, and again right across the street with the red house that indicates the historic site. It is near the intersection of West Paseo de Cristobal and South El Camino Real within the residential low zone. The lot is 4,700 square feet, and this property is not within the architectural overlay. The photo here shows the property as it exists now, with landscaping in front. Across the street is 104 Paseo de Cristobal. This property is on our historic resources list. The original original structure was built in 1929, and that involves this gabled single-story element at the front. The second-story addition to the rear was entitled in 2013 with a cultural heritage permit. This slide here indicates the rendering that was shown to DRC first. There were some comments that I have indicated here that DRC made to try to simplify some of the design elements, and so that arched element on the second story was something that was identified to modify the rotunda style entry, not the entry itself, but where the roof meets the veranda and the chimney element to the right. So again, the existing architecture is a Spanish ranch style that has tan stucco, S-style roofing, and it has hip roofing. What would be changing here, obviously, is a more gabled style roofing than the hip roofing that exists now. It was reviewed by Design Review Subcommittee on August 14th. This shows the modifications that were made after that design review meeting, where there's no longer the segmented arch on the veranda that has been simplified to a straight beam. And then you can see the balcony portion of the veranda was pulled back to give some breathing room to that rotunda element. The chimney, however, does still exist as it was shown on the original plans. Additional landscaping was provided to meet the 50% standard, and they have indicated the provision of 2 trees. The landscape plan was sent to Pat Murphy, the city's landscape architect consultant, for input. Staff did ask about, you can see in this image, the red area is a parkway, and on Paseo de Cristóbal, this is largely a planted parkway. The city's landscape architect recommended that the predominant tree on the street is a queen palm, so potentially to plant 2 queen palms there. The city engineer did ask to defer that question just to make sure that they don't have concerns with uplifting at the sidewalk at that location. So the condition that I've entered, we'll discuss in a minute, does defer to the city engineer. Development standards are shown on this slide, and we can go into depth on those if you would like, but essentially the height and setback standards are met by this project. In summary, the proposed addition and remodel is in scale and character with the development of residences here within the residential low zone and consistent with the general plan's intent for that zone. The applicant did make the minor revisions to address most of design review's comments, and design review indicated that the project would not have negative impacts on the abutting historic property. I've indicated here non-standard conditions just to make that easier for you to highlight any conditions that are project specific. So 4.14 is a condition just that the chimney would comply with building codes. So as is shown, the chimney was a single story element, and the new second story addition is too close to the chimney for it to operate as it still does, so they would have to convert that to a direct vent or gas chimney. So that condition covers that. And then condition 5.6 was what I had just referenced, where within the parkway, staff is interested in providing some landscaping to bring that character back, but defers to the city engineer on whether those queen palms would be appropriate at this location. And finally, 5.10 is a condition that the applicant shall replace concrete within the sidewalk with tiles to match the Ole Hansen replica tile sidewalk, which is common along this street. And that is something that is indicated on the applicant's plans already. So the condition is somewhat redundant, but that does reflect, again, that character of the street. So staff's recommendation is to determine the project to be categorically exempt per CEQA Class 1 for existing facilities, and adopt resolution PC 19-036 to approve this cultural heritage permit 19-047 for the Gordnier addition. The architect and applicant are here if the commission should have any questions for them. I, of course, am available as well.
Quick question.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, just wanted to confirm that you've spoken with the applicant about these conditions of approval, and they're accepting of this?
I have, yes.
And they are?
Yes.
Okay. I think the chimney looks good, but that's just me.
Is the question, is the applicant agreeable to removing the chimney entirely?
I would defer to the applicant on that one. So the condition as I have it written is just to comply with the building code, which wouldn't require the removal of the chimney, but the alteration.
Okay.
That's something certainly commission could consider.
Okay. And as an alternative to the queen palms, what plant material has been identified in the event that the landscape architect decides that that queen palm has a root ball that would be invasive to the sidewalk?
Yeah, so what has been proposed is Demandia margarita, and I'm not a landscape architect, but that is a ground cover. So it's something staff preferred that it would not be a shrub, so that the car doors, for instance, can still open for street parking. So it's a ground cover that's indicated.
Okay. And have we considered root barriers with just to continue the integrity of the streetscape there to make the palms work if it's found that the roots unbarriered, if you will, could be invasive? If those root barrier system put in, that could be a way to mitigate.
I'm sure that that would be a requirement by the city engineer if we do install the palms.
Okay.
And again, I'm deferring to the city engineer at this point.
Okay. Any other questions of the planner?
Jonathan, can you talk about the character of the street? Is this the house regarding mass, size?
Sure. So the house is, it is in a series of 3 single-story homes at this point, but one of those single-story is actually not a single family. It is a duplex that's just to the left as you're facing the front of the property. I do have one image here at the end that is more of the streetscape generally. So this doesn't show the residential character. This gets into the tile sidewalks that I had mentioned. But the historic property that's directly across the street is the primary reason for this review, and they did undergo a very similar permit process where there's a second-story addition that is set back from the first-story elements. So the second-story portion doesn't come all the way up to the building wall of the first story. It is set back a bit, and the first second-story element that you get to is a veranda as well. So that open character does help to offset the mass a little bit further back. But I did walk the street, and there are a variety of second-story or two-story residences on the street.
Between the sidewalk and the street, I see something concrete, right?
Yes.
And just behind that, it looks like there's trees growing. And did the applicant get rid of the grass?
So this is something this is the property in question right here. And so there was landscaping in this parkway along the entire stretch of the street at one time. The applicant did not get rid of that. Like from going back in Street View, I can tell that it's been about 20 years since that was removed. Okay. But there was landscaping there, and it was filled in at some point by someone. So the condition is to bring that back to being a landscape character to match the street.
So the trees would go in that area?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Jonathan, you walk the street. Did you see a lot of queen palms?
They're right there.
Yes, yeah.
That's a king palm.
So directly behind and at the property, it's not the next property, but one up. There are 2 mature queen palms, and I did walk, and that is the most common tree on the street. But this street doesn't have a standard street tree. There's, as you go along this parkway, you will find quite the mix where sometimes the tiles have been extended, sometimes it's grass, sometimes you do have trees that are not palms. So the queen palm is the most common, but it is not the only tree that's on the street.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
I was
Mr.
just
Talley?
going to respond to, I mean, I live down in Southwest here, and it's like this. They're 1 story, then they become 2 stories, so the character changes over time.
Okay. Any other questions of staff or the applicant? Okay. I'd like to move on to public comments on this item. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this item? Hearing none, I'll close the public comment period and open it up for discussion. Okay.
I'm in favor of this project, assuming David told you it was going to cost you more than you think for a remodel, but that's all I would say.
Okay. Well, I think it's nice to see some improvement here. I think that the renderings are a little, in my opinion, are a little sparse. I am sensitive to the historic use across the street, but I think that there'll be an improvement, and I agree that the chimney element should remain. I think obviously staff isn't asking for it. The first read, I thought staff was recommending that it be removed, but it's not that way. We're just bringing it to code. That's all. And I think with the the changes that have taken place with the design, it's an improvement. So I'm in support of the project. However, I would like to see some street trees. And regardless of the variety, something that's consistent with what exists there now, be it a queen palm or a king palm, just to maintain that continuity and flow, of having something in the right-of-way, some vertical elements there. The Diamondia is a flat, very hardy ground cover, but it adds no dimension to, and it certainly wouldn't lend to the intent that we seem to have here, and that would be to continue or to have that continuity and flow in the streetscape of the trees, so, yeah. Anybody else?
I like the project. I think it's an improvement. The rotunda entry adds some interest to the street scene. Previously, the elevation was dominated by the two-car garage. So certainly this new entry and the balcony improve. I'd like to see trees in the parkway. I understand the city engineer has some concern. I don't really know why they have concern over having some trees on the parkway. In that segment of a tree, there are quite a few different types of trees. Going from toward the uphill, there are some Mexican fern palm. Across the street, there is a broadleaf flowering tree. I believe it's acacia, or it could be some pea family trees. Then going down here, there are a lot of I see a few king palms, but a lot of king palm with the smooth shaft. So I'd like you to just go back to the landscape architect to identify a tree species, and try to have the civil engineer to accept that tree is good for tree in the parkway is good. So that's all.
Jonathan, I'm also in favor of putting trees there. I think they'd add more character to the street, and I'm in favor of this project. I think it's a great addition to the neighborhood.
Okay. Well, we can
Make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to ask that a motion be made. Would anybody care to make a motion?
I will make a motion that we approve resolution number PC 19036, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Clemente, California, approving Cultural Heritage Permit 19047 Gordoniera Addition, a request to construct an 819-square-foot second-floor addition on a single-family residence at 103 West Paseo de Cristobal.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-4.
4-0.
4-0. Yeah.
Good luck.
Good luck. Okay, so as the last item was moved out of order, we're going to move on to our regular agenda order and start with oral and written communications.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could I request a quick 3 to 5 minute recess since we didn't take one between the study session, and we could also pull back Dawn?
Yeah. Everybody okay with that? 5 minute?
Chris, are you sticking around, or are you? Thank you.
Okay. So why don't we convene at 7:35? That's in 10 minutes. Okay? meeting. And so we are number 6. We're here, oral and written communication. Members of the audience may address the commission on matters of public interest which pertain to the city and are not otherwise on the agenda. If you wish to speak, please step forward to the microphone and, if you desire, state your name and/or city of residence for the record and make your presentation. Please limit your presentation to 3 minutes. And we have a number of cards here. I'll go ahead and go in order that I received them. The first one has, Christy Newhausen. Christy? So Christy, you'd like to speak on small cell and public right-of-way?
Yes.
And public right-of-way, okay. Go ahead. You got 3 minutes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. AT&T's application and appeal failed to study the specific impact that the tower would pose for the Rancho Cristianitos residents in the park that are all within that 300-foot perimeter. When the replacement location of the new proposed pole is considered, the actual closest occupiable structure would be the property's owner's lot, that is within 60 feet, according to Google Maps, not the Rancho Del Mar apartment complex that is 91 feet away. Please see the handout. Perhaps more significantly, the Rancho Cristianitos community is located above ground level from the utility pole being proposed. This essentially places the node within closer to eyeline sight, posing potentially greater risk with exposure to RF, in addition to increased visibility that creates a visual nuisance and impedes the public right-of-way. While you repeatedly discussed how this was an issue back in August 21st for the Via Turquiza small cell site due to the elevated homes above that streetlight, you failed to apply that same standard to the Calle del Cerro location, whose light post is also above grade for the homes in Rancho Cristianitos. While your decision on this site ultimately resulted in a denial, I am asking that each member go back and review this location so that you as a body approving these small wireless facilities will be consistent in your reasoning and decision-making. This is a significant issue that will be facing many more neighborhoods throughout our city and that will have lasting effects on the health of our children, wildlife, scenic corridors, property values, and aesthetic standards. That will place an unfair burden on homeowners at the expense of AT&T's or other telecommunication companies' profits. We cannot allow this to happen without greater public transparency and input in order to properly take action and establish an ordinance for small cell sites in the public right-of-way that considers all stakeholders involved. AT&T's application have proven to be inaccurate, deceptive, and lack critical information that only further highlights the carelessness of AT&T in order to rapidly deploy these cell towers all throughout our small city. I urge you to act in good faith of the process and for the citizens. Demand more of these applicants and swiftly work toward establishing a city ordinance that can maintain local control to fullest extent possible of the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Yes, sir.
Just as a follow-on to that, to staff and council. Listening.
I'm sorry.
No, just the comment that was brought up there. It would be nice to have more information on the fact of the antenna placement as regards to the surrounding terrain, right? If you're in a bowl, is there a limitation or a requirement of the height above grade for an antenna? Again, it would just be something, I don't need an answer right now, it'd just be something to consider, but I think that's a valid, if you're in a fishbowl, right, the actual antenna, this is grade, the antenna is now 2 feet above grade, immediately there, right around the area, so it'd be nice to know if we can consider that.
Yeah, well, it depends on what they do specifically in design standards, but you can have a minimum height above the street level, where like it can't be below a certain distance, for safety reasons.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the next speaker is Kristen Fuller, and it is to discuss the small cell tower issue. Kristen?
Hello, Planning Commission. I'm here to encourage a thorough and well-thought-out city ordinance for the implementation of small cell sites going forward in San Clemente. My family lives in the Reserve East community on the corner of Camino Veracruz and Avenida Vista Hermosa. To date, 3 AT&T small cell sites along Avenida Vista Hermosa were approved this summer right outside of my neighborhood within a quarter-mile area or less. Now a 4th cell site at 3108 Camino Veracruz is being appealed by AT&T, which will further encircle my neighborhood, and this will be decided at the November 19th City Council meeting. So if you look at a map, basically my particular neighborhood is the one in town that's getting like bombarded in overlapping RF circles. So I don't know if this is the part of the master plan, but it's very disturbing. My main concern is that even within the FCC laws on the RF, that many of the small cell sites to be installed with possibly no ongoing RF emission testing, that the danger of the cumulative RF could be harmful to nearby residents. I spoke to a woman in Huntington Beach where they have about 10,000 of these being rolled out. She had an AT&T representative, like a tech, come to her house, and he told her that if she was too close to 2 of these small cell sites, it would exceed the FCC limit of the RF. So we can't look at these in isolation. We have to look at them in a cumulative RF effect. The overlapping range of RF, as well as the potential future carrier cell site RFs that could be coming in as other carriers want applications approved, is just very concerning. And I'm just concerned that my neighborhood and other neighborhoods will get cooked like a microwave. So I really am asking for independent, regular RF testing that should be written into the ordinance, so that, like we mentioned, you all were mentioning earlier, that we just can keep tabs and keep an eye on this, just for the safety of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Chair, if I may ask a question to our city planner.
Commissioner Wu, go ahead.
Gabriel, there appear to be a rush of applications. And we understand that the federal law prohibits us to have a moratorium. And currently the staff is working on a small cell ordinance. What is the timeline of this ordinance?
So the design review subcommittee will be considering this next week, and that's the development standards for small cells. So that's going to be October 23rd. And so that will be an opportunity also for the public to be there to weigh in or provide comment. And then subsequent to that, do we have anything else scheduled right now? Not yet. So it'll be presented to Design Review Subcommittee. Based on the feedback that's received by the subcommittee, will determine if there's further modifications needed to the ordinance. And then subsequent to that, it'll go to the Planning Commission. So we'll have to see what the feedback is from the subcommittee first.
But that's about the design guidelines. You can work on the ordinance at the same time.
Well, they're going to be considered concurrently.
When is the Planning Commission is going to look at the draft ordinance?
They won't.
You can give me a time frame, a couple months.
Yeah, so if I may, we do have a draft of the ordinance. Because there's no design standards in the ordinance, it's not really the purview of the design review subcommittee. So that's what's being reviewed first. Because it wouldn't make sense for us to bring the ordinance with those design standards to the Planning Commission before the design review subcommittee had reviewed the design and development standards. And we do have this new workshop that has been requested. So we'll be doing that, I believe, in November. And so these are all opportunities for public comment. As you know, public comment input, as well as input from commissioners, both at DRSC and other ways, as well as our council members, can require changes. Changes require more time. So it is staff's intent to have the draft ordinance ready for Planning Commission consideration within the next couple of months, but I can't give you a definitive date because that date could potentially change based on the steps that have to occur before that.
Okay, well, thank you. But it's my desire to see this. Any way you can expedite that process, I think it would benefit the community. And in the meantime, as an interim measure, if you can start implement something that is allowed by law, by current law, then, for example, the last time we reviewed the AT&T application, there was no alternative site study, and that was a part of the reason. So for those like that, perhaps we can include them into the requirement of the materials we asked for them.
Yeah, I think we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Brown?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, okay. Any other, comments? Our next speaker is Laura Fisher. She would like to speak on the small cell issue.
Good evening. My name is Laura Fisher, and I'm speaking today in regards to the 2 small cell facilities that are under review again as of the last City Council meeting after you, the Planning Commission, denied them on August 21st. I live in the reserve community, and I've lived in the same house there for 15 years. One of the small cell sites is 58 feet from my house and directly above our backyard and my daughter's second-story bedroom window. I'm in opposition to this cell site, as well as others that are being placed in close proximity to homes, schools, and parks. We have formed an alliance of San Clemente residents that are concerned about the placement of these small cell facilities. Our group is called Safe Cell Sites for SC. You can now find this group on Facebook. As of the last City Council meeting, the City Council asked AT&T to work on their application further and submit further information. So one of our questions is, when is that coming in, and can we have a look at it? We'd also obviously like to see the ordinances expedited. We would also like to request that the City Council conduct a third-party independent study to verify the information AT&T is providing. The independent study should provide alternatives for site locations and alternatives for technology that would provide similar coverage solutions to what are proposed. For example, technology investigated should include pico sites, microsites, and macro cell sites. The city should also require the applicant to pay the bill for the independent study. It is not reasonable to rely on AT&T to provide us all the technical information and alternatives. AT&T has already proven not to act in good faith and in the best interest of residents. Proposing a site that is within 60 feet of a kindergarten playground, that one was across from Marblehead School, and claiming that this was the only solution is proof of this. Our group would also like to make you aware that there's national legislation proposed in the House and the Senate to nullify the rules issued by the FCC to revoke state and local authority to regulate telecommunications equipment, speed of deployment, and control the payment. The bills are sponsored by House Representative Anna Eshoo from California and Senator Feinstein, so obviously we're supporting those. Repeatedly in the last City Council meeting, the attorney made reference to denial based on aesthetic reasons. We'd like to know specifically how the issues raised during the last City Council meeting did not meet the level of aesthetic concern that is needed to deny the appeal for both sites. So we just encourage the Planning Commission to talk to the City Council. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, the next speaker we have is Courtney Morrow, and she would like to speak on the small cell wireless facilities topic.
There's a PowerPoint that Vonnie sent in.
Hi.
Oh. Got it. Where's the plate? No, I got it. It's this button, right? Sorry, I haven't used PowerPoint in a long time now that I'm at home taking care of 3 kids. Okay. You may have seen this today, Vonnie sent it over, but I just want to go ahead and read it here at the Planning Commission. We would like for you to please include in the ordinance that the requirement that applicants of small cell towers are required to dismantle or remove obsolete transmission devices, equipment, structures within city limits prior to approval or assembly of new devices such as small cell nodes. Please also include a provision of approval to include that AT&T, AT&T has demonstrated a pattern of behavior, the disregard for city safety, fire prevention, responsibility, and liability, and having constructed, then abandoning a very large nuisance condition. This is the tower that I am, and this is actually very close to the Calle del Cerro location that's being considered as part of the appeal. AT&T's dumped, obsolete, deteriorating massive structure towers over hundreds of residential properties, business park, and ridgeline hiking trail. This tower has been a magnet for transient homeless campers, vandals, drug users, and high schoolers who frequently climb the structure. This structure is a liability. The RSC Master Association has removed transient campers and fire hazardous materials repeatedly from this area, which is located in the CAL FIRE very severe high fire zone area. Severe damage to native flora has been done to the open space by unauthorized activities of the site. Children are known to climb and jump on the deteriorating structure while playing in this area. And I put playing kind of loosely because most of the time they're smoking pot up there, which is also very dangerous when you consider how high they're climbing on this thing. This cell tower also has easy access on the paved ridgeline trail from the city lots for transient campsites as proposed in the amendment to Rancho San Clemente's specific plan. Refusal of AT&T to remove this offensive and hazardous structure has generated increased costs of security, liabilities, and maintenance and security to the city, business park, and Rancho San Clemente Master Association. The increased risk of fires, accidents, and liabilities imposed on the city by AT&T is not acceptable. This pattern of behavior exhibited by AT&T should not be permitted in San Clemente. Please find attached some photos, and page 49 of Harborview Estates, CC&R is referencing the 1994 AT&T tower. Was that on there? Okay, that's it. Thank you. Can you please include abandonment in our ordinance of old structures?
Thank you, Courtney. Okay, I see no other cards. That concludes our speakers on this topic. All right. And here you go. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to item 7, consent calendar. 7A, it's
Mr.
a 6.
Speaker, may I
Yes, sir.
say that we do not pull it, but we have direct staff to come back in like 6 to 9 months because this project hasn't even started yet. They haven't pulled permits yet. So we can expedite our meeting tonight and not discuss this, but have them bring them back in 6 to 9 months since they haven't even started the project. Would the commission consider that?
I would entertain that.
Item 7A.
7A.
Consent. Glaucoma Biana. 6-month.
So I'd move that we.
Okay. I would like to, I would consider that, and I think I would like to ask our planner a question. Could you confirm that the applicant has 2 weeks to pull permits?
Yeah, there's a condition on the resolution that requires the applicant to pull the permit by October 30th. So, and the applicant's aware of that.
And once the applicant pulls the permits, how long does the applicant have to actually execute on the work?
Permits are good for 3 years, I think.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure, but
1 year? That's what I thought, 1 year. We're getting hand signals from the audience.
And if the permit is not pulled, the conditional use permit and all the other associated permits are null and void, correct?
yes, if it is, the CUP is supposed to commence when the building permit is issued.
Okay, is the applicant allowed to extend that term?
If they submit an application to the city requesting that.
For the CUP or just for the permit?
Amending the CUP.
Okay.
Okay.
Would that come back to this body, or is that handled at administrative level?
It would come back to the Plan Commission.
Okay.
He's too late.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we receive, file the report, and ask for a report in 6 months.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. We got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is passed. 4-0.
Sorry you guys came for nothing.
Yeah, okay. Okay, we're moving on to item 8, public hearings. The time limitation for applicants is 10 minutes, and all other speakers will have 3 minutes. And the public hearing process includes a staff presentation, a presentation by the applicant not to exceed 10 minutes, as I had just stated, and public testimony. To facilitate the meeting for all attendees, the public is asked to limit their individual presentation to 3 minutes. Following closure of the public hearing, the Planning Commission will respond to questions raised during the hearing, discuss the issues, and act upon the matter by motion. We had moved item A. We had advanced that, and we had acted upon it, so we're going to move to item B, which is zoning amendment 19-343, non-conforming provisions for mobile homes. Ms. Savage will be presenting.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. The item on your agenda tonight is amending provisions of our zoning code for non-conforming mobile homes and mobile home parks. There are 4 changes. The first 3 are within our non-conforming provisions section. It clarifies that the definitions for mobile homes and mobile home parks are defined by state law. The second is clarifying that any mobile home or mobile home park that it has a CUP or a conditional use permit is not subject to the provisions of our non-conforming standards. The third is clarifying that any modifications to mobile homes or mobile home parks are subject to state requirements. The fourth and final change that we're proposing tonight is in the special use provisions of the zoning code and as they relate to mobile homes and mobile home parks. Those special use provisions apply to new mobile homes on a single family unit or the establishment of new mobile home parks. This change clarifies that the provisions within those special use standards do not apply to existing mobile homes or mobile home parks. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation to City Council, and both myself and our City Attorney are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Does anybody have a question of staff on this item?
Yeah, I have some general questions. What's the nexus for this? This was a result of a lawsuit. What was the reason that the mobile home park needed to go to litigation over definitions and terms? What was their problem?
So the basis of the lawsuit, sir?
Yeah.
The basis of the lawsuit had to do with the legal status of the mobile home parks, given that it's a non-conforming use on a open space zone. And so this zoning amendment was one of the actions that was part of the settlement agreement that was reached between the city and the mobile home park. And what the ordinance does, as staff explained, is clarify how these particular provisions with respect to nonconformance of special uses relate to existing mobile homes on the ground today.
So this mobile home park, if they need to make a change or an improvement or expansion, then is their path to do that?
Sir, so the path to make any sort of alteration or expansion of the site does not change based on the amendments here today. Any time that an existing mobile home, manufactured home, wants to go through any sort of renovation or expansion, it will be permitted by the Housing and Community Development Department at the state, and also because this particular mobile home park is in the coastal zone. Any form of development would require a coastal development permit. So those are already the primary reviewing bodies for development within the park right now. Should somebody want to install and establish a brand new mobile home, it would still require city permitting, but that was also the case before this amendment.
So why do not any of these definitions or things that we're addressing tonight mention a coastal development permit?
So the necessity for a coastal development permit in these cases is independent of the city's zoning code with regard to the nonconformance and the special use permits. As long as you're in the coastal overlay within the city, which is the same as the coastal zone, you are still going to have to obtain a coastal development permit from the Coastal Commission. And if I may add one nuance to that, the city is currently working on its local coastal program, and the city had adopted and was certified by the Coastal Commission the land use plan. And in the land use plan, I believe it was General Policy 10, exempted this particular mobile home park from the city's future updated LCP. So even once the LCP is certified by the Coastal Commission and then the city takes authority to issuing coastal development permits, this particular mobile home park, Capistrano Shores, would still go to the Coastal Commission for coastal development permits and not go to the city. So again, the status as to how they are permitted would remain as it is today.
So why the need for these particular changes to our zoning code?
So these were particular changes that were requested by Capistrano Shores and agreed to in the settlement because they make particular clarifications that are of interest to Capistrano Shores. And if there's someone here from Capistrano Shores who might be interested in speaking more directly to this, but one of the key issues has been jurisdiction over manufactured homes. And there are two particular state agencies, in this case HCD and the Coastal Commission, because it's in the coastal zone. But there are also federal regulations with respect to manufactured homes, and it was important to Capistrano Shores that those be expressly mentioned within the definitions and within the of the non-conforming provisions, and also within the special use rules.
And the importance from a degree. Why is it earth-shaking or critical that these be in here when they're not in our general plan?
So they are, they're requirements of state and federal law. And it's of note when cities expressly codify that within definitions and zoning provisions. It's not in any way in conflict with the general plan or the city's future local coastal program. These are rules that are of state and federal statute, and in some cases regulations. So the city would be bound by them regardless of whether or not, regardless of what's in the general plan. But from our review, they were entirely consistent with the city's existing land use policies.
Say that again, please. Just they were consistent?
Correct. So, you know, when we looked over the ordinance, we considered what were the land use principles in the general plan, as well as the city's now certified land use plan. And given the overriding state concerns and federal concerns over manufactured homes, and particularly since this was in the coastal zone, we didn't find any conflict with either. In fact, this works consistent with those documents.
But it was important enough for Capistrano Shores to take legal action to bring this to the fore here?
Correct. The Capistrano Shores concern had to do with the overall legal status of the mobile home park, and this had been a lawsuit that had this started, I believe it was 18 years ago, and had to do with much of the history of the city's zoning and general plan land use designations for the site. Currently, the site is zoned and designated in the city's land use plan as open space, which renders the existing structures and uses non-conforming. Within the city's non-conforming code, there was already a provision that enabled for the full restoration and replacement, a rehabilitation of a mobile home that was somehow destroyed, so that it wouldn't then terminate the non-conforming use. What this ordinance would do, it would make clear that the non-conforming uses generally apply not to an existing mobile home park that has a conditional use permit. In this case, Capistrano Shores has an existing conditional use permit.
They do?
Yes, and all of those...
Dated from when?
I believe it's 1961. It was
a CUP from 1961?
Yes. And so the terms of a CUP are guided by the rules in the municipal code. So although the non-conforming provisions would not apply to a mobile home park that has a standing CUP, all the other rules about CUPs that are in the municipal, or that are in the zoning code about discontinuation of use, conditions, revocation, those would still apply to a mobile home park that has a conditional use permit.
Is there any other mobile home parks in the city that have an existing CUP that's longstanding that this would apply to besides Capistrano Shores?
I don't know the answer to that. Staff?
I mean, there's a mobile home park just down the street and across, about a mile away from this particular mobile home park. They have their own beach access and beach park there. Do they concur with this action, and has this been run by them as far as approval?
At the Palm Beach mobile home, and then we also have Shore Cliff mobile home.
Yeah, Shore Cliffs mobile home down about a mile away there in the coastal zone also. So has this been run by them?
As far as staff is aware, it has not. But as our attorney has explained, the provisions for the mobile homes and mobile home parks are and will be the same, but these zoning amendments just clarify those provisions, specifically and explicitly referring back to state and federal regulations.
But you have not contacted these other mobile home parks that are down in the coastal zone that could possibly have existing CUPs?
No, and these provisions do not change any of our regulations in relation to those properties.
This is unique to Capistrano Shores only? It doesn't state that in some of the verbiage here.
The processes and the application of our zoning code as it stands today will be the same after these zoning amendments. The zoning amendments are specifically to appease the settlement agreement with Capistrano Shores because it was important for Capistrano Shores to explicitly state the provisions that would be changed here. But again, it doesn't change the application or the provisions of the zoning code as it stands today.
But the other mobile home parks have not been informed of this action that would affect them or at all? Or
Correct.
They have not been informed of it, or they don't know, or they're blind on the subject?
Correct.
Sir.
Commissioner, if I may, for the chair. Just to make one clarification, there was one particular provision that I mentioned today that is unique to Capistrano Shores, and that is, I think it's General Policy 10 in the Certified Land Use Plan that cuts Capistrano Shores out from the city's future jurisdiction of the local coastal program. The other provisions in the zoning code, as an amendment, as Jennifer mentioned, would apply across the board. And if I may, staff has indicated that there was not a special effort made to reach out to these other mobile home parks, but I believe all the other notice provisions were made. So much like any other zoning ordinance that would apply generally to the public, this one was noticed accordingly.
My question to you then is, since the general plan and our coastal land use plan have basically, eliminated them from our jurisdiction, aren't these changes moot then? Why do we even need to make them?
So the changes are not necessarily moot for a couple of different reasons. One, the rules of nonconformance, as well as the rules of how existing conditional use permits apply, that's still within the city's jurisdiction. Anybody who goes to the Coastal Commission for a coastal development application, if the city does not have this jurisdiction, and it must be approved by the Coastal Commission, the Coastal Commission still requires the applicants first get from the city the necessary approvals, including conditional use permit, variance, what have you. So those rules are still very much applicable. The ultimate development would still have to be approved by a coastal development permit. The reason the non-conforming uses in particular are relevant here is because there's a provision of the Coastal Act that says anytime a structure is destroyed, you refer back to the local jurisdiction's provisions on nonconformance, and that's regardless of whether or not there is a local coastal program or not in place. So even though the city will not have the ultimate permitting authority for expansions and other types of development, there are still important aspects of our code that do control here. It's just a matter of like I mentioned before, whether or not if you're trying to expand a mobile home, that would go into the HCD's jurisdiction and also the Coastal Commission's jurisdiction. But these other provisions are important given that Capistrano Shores and perhaps the other mobile home parks have a conditional use permit. If that conditional use permit is somehow violated, if a use is abandoned, or if there's any other effect to the CUP, we would turn to the city's code when it comes to conditional use permits.
So if I may, it sounds to me like there's really no reason, everything I'm hearing you say is that, well, this is just cleanup. And so I'm always very hesitant when somebody says that as a settlement to a lawsuit, we as a body, not a political body here, I mean, we're a subdivision of a political body, but not the political body, need to adopt this because of that. I'm looking at the findings here, and I can't tell you how the zoning amendment will actually promote the public health, safety, and welfare other than maybe it makes something easier to read. I mean, that's not a finding I can sit here and make right now. And with all due respect to, you know, a settlement agreement that may or may not have been entered into, I don't get to consider that as a decision. And in fact, I shouldn't consider that as a decision. That's something that a political body, maybe the city council, can make that decision if they want to do. But you know, we're talking about, it feels like some of this is very arcane and very, you know, dancing on the head of a pin to a large degree. If we're talking about, you know, adding certain regulations in here, certain references, and taking certain references out, and I don't know how that satisfies my duty on this body, right? I mean, I can understand that in a political context, but we're apolitical here. We're supposed to make findings or not make findings. So, so I guess give me the Cliff Notes version of how does this help the community out, other than it settles a lawsuit?
Well, the benefit of clarifying that these types of manufactured homes are subject to the jurisdiction of HCD, and in this case, in the coastal zone, is important, particularly given the fact that the LUP that was adopted by the city carves out this particular mobile home park. So
but the open space in the CUP, there's something there that's sitting in the back of my head that just tells me that that feels like that's going to come and bite me in 20 or 30 years.
Commissioner, how might that be?
I don't know. It just doesn't. I mean, I haven't heard articulated why we're making those, why we're making that distinction from what we're currently talking at, what's currently codified today.
So the reason it might not come back to bite the city is because the rules applicable to a conditional use permit still apply. So although mobile home parks that have a conditional use permit are now exempt from the non-conforming provisions writ large, should, under the city's code with respect to conditional use permits, should the use be discontinued or abandoned for a period of a year, the conditional use permit would terminate. And so, which is a similar function as to a non-conformance, because the purpose of the use permit is that you get to go, you get to continue to move even when you're non-conforming until you abandon that particular use. So those rules would still very much apply in this case.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wu?
First, I'd like to declare that I had a extra-party communication. When I walked the site, I bumped into a site manager, Eric. I'm sorry, I don't remember your last name, but we had a brief discussion about this project. Question for Mr. Savage on first revision definition. The zoning code, section 17.88.030 is the section for all definitions. Now, in your proposed definition revision, you exclude the mobile home parks But why don't you just why don't you change the definition in the definition section and refer to that section here? Because if we were to do what you asked us to do, we would have two definitions for mobile home parks and manufactured homes. One, the standard one in our definition section, another one that's applicable to non-conforming use only. At that time, we refer to state definition. Why we create two definitions?
With this specific change for definitions applies to the non-conforming provisions. There are still provisions and standards for mobile homes and mobile home parks under special use standards in the code, and the definitions for those special use standards would still lie within the section 17.88.030.
Well, we can simply go to sections on that definition section and change that definition, say refer to state law. That will make everything clear.
There is the potential for that. However, staff did not analyze changing the main definitions and how that would affect the special use provisions in the code.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Go ahead.
Has federal law specifically preempted us on any of this here?
The federal law preemption is not nearly as vast as it is in other matters of quasi-public utilities like wireless, what have you. It has more to do with the particular standards of assessing whether or not a manufactured home is built safely. The real preemption occurs at the state level when it comes to approving expansions or other alterations to an existing mobile home.
So why are we making reference to federal standards then?
Because
once we draw that into, I mean, that's, once we make reference to federal standards, then we're, covered by all sorts of federal issues, whether that's the FAA or anything along those lines.
Yes, correct, sir. So in this case, like I said, the federal regulations have to do particularly with the standards for safety, the standards for good construction. And so the incorporation here would not change the review authority. It would just have to.
So we're okay striking that then?
Striking the
federal, yeah. I mean, if it doesn't matter, then we can strike it.
Well, it does. It matters in the sense.
So why does it matter?
It matters in the sense that we're referring to state law, and then we're also referring to the other existing body of law that governs mobile home and manufactured homes. It was an effort to be like comprehensive as possible, acknowledging the fact that there are state and federal regulations that guide their approval. Like I mentioned before, for example, if there is a brand new mobile home that is built on site, it is still, like a brand new mobile home is still permitted by the city. And so the city would have to comport to the state and federal regulations with respect to health, safety, and those other, those other regulations are typically found in a building code.
So it matters, but it doesn't.
It matters in those cases. It doesn't. Referring to the federal regulations is not a ceding of authority in terms of permitting. It's just referencing that when it comes to manufactured homes, there are these two other bodies of law that matter with respect to particular building standards.
Is it a matter of ceding of authority in any matter whatsoever, not just permitting? Any potential matter from the city, are we ceding our authority at all?
No, sir. The way the city's permitting authority, regulatory authority over mobile home parks today would stay the same, particularly those in the coastal zone. They have to be approved with development has to be approved by a coastal development permit from the Coastal Commission, and alterations, expansions to existing structures have to be approved by the Department of Housing and Community Development.
So why is subsection or paragraph D on 1772030C.3 under exemptions? It's on page 4 of our packet. The new paragraph D, mobile home parks in compliance with any applicable conditional use permit shall be exempt from all the provisions of chapter 17.72. Why do we need that there? What does that do operatively?
Operatively, it converts it moves consideration over use abandonment over discontinuation of use, revocation, clearly to the clearly to the conditional use provisions of the municipal code. There was already in the code, in the non-performing use provisions, subdivision, which is referenced here, subdivision E, which allows for the full replacement of mobile homes. What this actually does by referring back to the conditional use permit is it makes clear that there are still some relevant limitations on mobile home parks that have been permitted by a conditional use permit.
So that's interesting.
See that?
You just used a word there, a modifier, that I thought was interesting, which was the full replacement, which is covered under 1772-060. Does this in any way impact our ability for partial replacements by making a mobile home park in compliance exempt?
Well, section 17.72060E, the existing provision, already contemplated both partial and full replacement.
Okay.
See, the wording in E was also a result of a lawsuit from Capistrano Shores. So every word was gone over about 4 or 5 years ago as a result of another Capistrano Shores lawsuit. So, and so, excuse you. So we're kind of stacking on, I guess, lawsuit on lawsuit here, I guess. Is that what we're doing?
Commissioner, the other provision, the subdivision E, was part of this same series of litigations, the same suit with Capistrano Shores, and this is the final effort to resolve that lawsuit. This was, I guess we could count that as like a preliminary effort, and now we're moving to.
We spent a lot of time on it about 4 or 5 years ago. At one time they had 6 or 7 lawsuits. I remember stacks of from their lawyer down in Oceanside. 2 hours before the meeting that was 400 pages thick. And so so I looked at this wording and I thought we had resolved all this 4 or 5 years ago, but obviously we have not. Is that correct?
Correct. The current settlement that is between the city and Capistrano Shores is the resolution to the existing litigation.
Till next time.
Certainly, but the prior lawsuits were part of this series of litigation.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't as though there was any particular lawsuit that was resolved and then a new one kicked in. It's the same series of litigation.
A question on the next paragraph down, 1728-190A. The underlined section at the bottom, it says, this subsection shall not apply to existing mobile homes and mobile home parks, including existing non-conforming mobile homes and mobile home parks. So that broadens this entire definition to everything, is that correct? Beyond just non-conforming? That the entire universe of mobile home parks is now covered by this. Is that what that word says to me?
If I may, that specific change is for the special use standards in a different section of the code, and that is a sentence to clarify that those standards for mobile homes and mobile home parks are for new mobile homes or new mobile home parks. And that is why that change references existing as well as existing non-conforming.
What was the main, what are we trying to solve in the litigation here? I mean, what was the crux of the issue? If you can give it to me in a shepherdized form.
Sure.
The Cliff Notes.
The crux of the issue was the legal standing of the mobile home park given the current zoning and land use designation for open space, and what that had to do and how that impacted the future of the mobile home park, as well as how it impacted smaller development projects within that, alterations, expansions, what have you. As I mentioned before, the city's permitting authority outside of this has not changed. In fact, the city has less permitting authority here than it would in other places, not just because of the fact it's in the coastal zone, but also because these types of buildings are expansions, they're regulated by Housing and Community Development. Plus, in this particular park, it was excised from the new LCP. So the changes here are changes that speak to what happens when you're existing mobile home park with a conditional use permit, and how you then turn to the rules about a conditional use permit for a mobile home park.
Okay. Commissioner Wu has been very patient in giving away some of his
That's fine,
time.
that's fine.
Would
So
continue.
for the third revision, 17.72.60E, I consider as a clarification. I have no more question on that. And then go back to exemptions. I'd like to combine that with the last revision, because the last sentence of 1728.190.A, the added sentence, this subsection should not apply to existing mobile homes and mobile home parks, including existing non-conforming mobile homes and mobile home parks. So that's another exemption in addition to what we have in 17.2.030.c.3, right?
Sorry, that is very confusing. So the first part that you read, which is our fourth change, again, that's a different section than non-conforming. That section is for the special use provisions, and you can distinguish it by the code reference of 17.28 instead of 17.72. So the fourth change in sections 17.28 is for the special use provisions for mobile homes and mobile home parks. And those specifically apply to new mobile homes or new mobile home parks.
Right, but this is in purpose and intent. So you're not asking us to do a statutory interpretation of existing law. You're asking us to change the purpose and intent of the law.
To clarify that the purpose and intent of those special use provisions are for new mobile homes, not existing, whether non-conforming or not.
When the law was written, the intent and purpose was already there. How do we second guess that? And let me ask you this. The last sentence of your last proposed revision expand the non-applicability to this section to all mobile homes and mobile home parks in the city. That's the verbiage. So if there's a public street somewhere in the city and there's in single-family home zone, someone put a mobile home there, so they would not be subjected to this section. If they want to upgrade, change their home, we have a mobile home park standard. For example, you need to have some eave projection. Your wall needs to have similar color. Your roof needs to have similar colors and materials with the neighbor. In essence, we want this mobile home or manufactured housing to look similar to the neighborhood, right? So now you are exempting them. If someone sitting on if an individual mobile home sitting on a single-family home lot, and they want to remodel it, they're not required to bring it to be in compliance with our mobile home park design requirement. Is that correct?
True, because it would be an existing mobile home that would be subject to state review and requirements.
So before this proposed change, the city has the opportunity to say, look, your existing mobile home or manufactured housing doesn't have those architectural features to look similar to your neighbors. When you do a major remodel, we would ask you to make those changes to improve it. Now we lose that opportunity.
That's not correct. This provision is the same as the non-conforming, whereby the application of this is the same today as it would be tomorrow if this is adopted. Another way to say that is any existing mobile home today is still subject to state standards. If this is adopted, the same applies.
I don't understand.
So that
Okay,
we're
Commissioner Todd.
talking, Sorry, is that okay?
Yes, please. Yeah,
So we're talking about state standards today. I assume we're dealing with kind of a state preemption of the local law. Right now, that's kind of what we're working under. So that seems to be working. What happens if state law changes and it's not preempted as much? Now we've given up our local control. Laws change.
Correct. So a couple of things about that. A few years ago, I forget exactly what year, the city worked out an arrangement with the Department of Housing and Community Development where there was a clarification that occurred that, in fact, HCD is one responsible for handling permitting of these particular expansions. Now, your point about whether or not laws change, they do change, and we still have all of these special use features in the code. The clarification here is that right now, under existing law, they do not apply to existing mobile homes. Should the law change, that's something that the Commission and Council can address at that point. But I understand your point.
I got a question for the council. First of all, does this resolution need 4 votes or the single majority of the quorum today?
This is a resolution before the Planning Commission. In the government code, it speaks to, I forget the particular section, it's in the 3000s, speaks to the necessity of a majority of the body approval by the City Council for an ordinance or resolution. That does not apply to the Planning Commission, so it could in fact be a majority of the quorum here today.
Okay. And the second question is on the last proposed revision. If the purpose is to satisfy Capistrano Shore, does it make sense to not expand it to all mobile homes? For example, we can simply, if the last sentence read this way, the subsection shall not apply to existing mobile home parks, including existing non-conforming mobile home parks. In other words, we take out those single individual mobile homes throughout the city. We take them out. Just make that change to reflect, to include mobile home parks only. Does it work?
Commissioner, we would have concerns about, in that case, advantaging and disadvantaging certain mobile home parks. From our review, this and the staff's review, this works across the board, and in terms of not further limiting the city's permitting authority. So the clarifications here should apply to any mobile home or mobile home park in the city, and not just to this particular mobile home park.
Well, park has their own circulation. It's kind of internalize everything inside the park, while individual mobile homes are sitting on public streets. We can make the differentiation between them, I assume.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, the difference between mobile home parks on private versus public property?
Between a mobile home park, which has its own gate and internal circulation, and individual mobile homes are putting on public street on a single family lot.
Yes, when it comes to the rules of the state with respect to manufactured homes, I don't believe it changes whether or not that manufactured home is on a single family lot or in a mobile home park. So the rules here would apply in either case.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or comments to staff? Hearing none, I would like to invite the applicant up to speak.
I don't have a tremendous, my name is Eric Anderson. I own the property management and live in Capistrano Shores. I've been very involved in this settlement that has gone on for the better part of 6 years now. The lawsuit is not 18 years old. That is not accurate. We filed this lawsuit in 2014 because we we're running up on a statute of limitations related to an illegal downzoning that occurred. It's the same downzoning that San Juan Partnership won against the city for $1 million. Exact same time frame, exact same notice, actually more egregious in our case. So from our perspective, we were full residential community one day. The next day, we are open space. That has created a tremendous amount of issues for us getting permits. Similar to what we're discussing today, cities trying to implement their building codes, their restrictions, their guidelines. And to clarify, Matthew, it wasn't that there was a clarifying event back in 2015. The state of California came to the city of San Clemente and revoked their permit authority because they had abused it for so many years, specifically to Capistrano Shores. So we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars getting to that point to where we could finally replace mobile homes in a mobile home park. So we are at the end of this tolling agreement with our lawsuit. We are now prepared to go to trial. We have spent, I don't know how many hours or days in City Hall with Best and Krieger and Scott Smith, Christina Talley, the San Clemente litigation firm. With our attorneys, we have come to this language. So I understand it may be confusing to you tonight, but we have spent hours and years perfecting this and getting to a point where we can agree. And we believe that it is a fair compromise on our part because we are still going forward as open space. This has financing effects, this has insurance effects, this has bundle of right property fundamental issues that we are willing to compromise to end this battle. And these clarifying things are important. Some of those things with non-conforming use. Right now, Capistrano Shores is the only community that has been there since 1960. And if this is not ratified, if we have a fire and more than 50% of our coaches are burned, we are abandoned and we're out. That's not a fair scenario for any community that's been there since 1960. And that applies to us because of these existing non-conforming special CUP conditions that we need to clarify. And that's what this language does. So I assure you this is well thought out. It's well discussed amongst our legal team as well as yours, as well as city planning, city engineering, James Microsoft. Everybody's been involved in this and it has been a long haul to get here. So please take that into consideration when you make your vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for speaking. I'd like to clarify the record. You are not the applicant.
Oh.
You're speaking on behalf.
Capistrano Shores.
But you're not the applicant. You're speaking on behalf of Capistrano Shores.
Correct.
Yes, thank you. And Jennifer, thank you for the great presentation, by the way. Very informative.
Congratulations, they're finally giving a new roof down there, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'd like to, any other speakers? I see none, so I'd like to close the public comment portion of this and enter into discussion with the commission. Is there anybody that would like to speak?
I'm just having a hard time making the findings and all this, but I'm willing to be persuaded by somebody up here. I guess I've been dealing with Capistrano Shores for 9 years, and I guess maybe I'm just a little worn out, like they are too.
Well, Mr. Talley, would you like to comment?
Yes, so I understand everything that you're saying, and I respect that, and I recognize that you're working towards trying to resolve litigation with the city and the political body of the city, right, which is city council and all of the people that you mentioned there. Problem with that is that I can't accept any of that as support for my findings here tonight. Now, the issue with that, I guess the, so what of that is that this gets appealed to the city council if this body was to vote no on this, and the city council can then exercise their jurisdiction to imply or to put this zoning amendment into effect, and they can look at things that I can't look at. And we've talked about this before, which is, we have to make findings. And I try to be as consistent as possible in how those findings come about. And I think I've said this on other issues where we put something up and city council pulled it up and they probably did the right thing on it, but we're kind of hamstrung on what we can do here as a body, because our job is to not consider the the lawsuit implications, or that this is a good deal for the city, or it's a good deal for Capistrano Shores, or it buries the hatchet of 6 years or however many years of litigation that have gone on. I've got to make the findings, and I can tell you, I can't come up with a finding here that that allows me to say that this is, you know, promoting the public health, safety, and welfare of the city, right? I think it may solve issues with the city, but I don't think it does that. And in fact, listening to some of the comments here, I think it reduces the city's potential exercise of power that it may have in the future. If the state law changes, we would have to then adopt a new ordinance to exercise power, which would be challenged. If there was a catastrophic event down at the mobile home park, you know, to your point of 50% of the mobile homes that or more that were decimated by whatever, you know, fire, tidal wave, whatever the case may be, you know, maybe the city wants to retain the power to be able to, you know, to look at that differently. I don't know, but just like the power, a government shouldn't take power for the sheer sake of taking government or power. It shouldn't, you know, it should be very careful with what it allows as well. So maybe that's not convincing you, Don. Sorry.
Okay, well, I'd like to comment on that. I think your concerns are important and actually worth discussion, and so I'm glad you mentioned that. But I personally, you know, I've read through these findings, and I had some of the same questions initially too. I started to really think about it. Legal's response to your question, explanation about how those findings were made, relative to the consistency with general plan, I felt more comfortable. And I'm to the point now with this, I feel comfortable for those reasons. So I'm comfortable supporting the amendment on that basis. But there is some question. There are some what ifs. You know, questions that we just don't have answers to now. And would there be a challenge later if state law changed and we had to amend our ordinance again? That's just something we would be obligated to do and then face that potential challenge. I mean, we just don't know. Not everything's perfect. Considering the history of this project and knowing what I do know in the short time I've been serving the city, I'd say a lot of work has been done and it's come a long way. And I'm comfortable with what I'm seeing here. So I would support the project for those reasons.
And then, Chair, if staff just would like to clarify that tonight is just a recommendation to the City Council.
Yes.
And is not appealable to City Council.
Okay. So they're going to make a decision.
Correct.
Okay, it's just a recommendation for so we're not the final decision.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, so do I have a motion? Is there a motion in the House? Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we, let me get the actual resolution here, that we approve resolution number PC 19035, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Clemente recommending the City Council approve an ordinance to enact zoning amendment 19343, amending Municipal Code Title 17 Zoning, Chapter 1728 Special Uses, and 1736 Commercial Zones and Standards to clarify standards regulating non-conforming mobile homes and mobile home parks.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So the motion is,
Excuse me, a point of order.
I can make a motion and oppose it.
No, you can't.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we had this occur a few weeks ago. A 2-to-2 motion technically means nothing happened, that it neither was approved or rejected. So there's a couple options. You could reconsider. You can make another motion, or another option here is to still vote to forward to the City Council with the result of a 2-to-2 vote.
Council, the point of order I'd like to raise is that the one who makes the motion has to vote for it. The one who seconds it doesn't have. Is that correct?
I don't believe that's correct. You can bring an item to the floor, particularly in this case where it's the item that was recommended by staff. It's a resolution that was recommended by staff. There is not an obligation of the one who brings the motion to vote for or against the motion.
Okay.
Just simply brings it to the floor for a vote, however the vote ends up.
Okay.
Okay, so do I have a motion to revisit the discussion? Would we like to send it on up in its current status, 2-2? Okay, then it looks like the motion does not carry, but the amendment recommendation will be forwarded to council with our votes as it stands. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may we take a quick moment just to make sure we record this correctly in the minutes?
Okay.
Mr. Chair, so to try to accurately characterize what happened in the minutes, I think it would be fair to say that on a vote to recommend approval, the commission voted 2-2, resulting in a tie and no action.
I think that's
That's
correct.
correct. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. Okay. We are moving on to new business. New business 9A, consideration of speed cushions on West El Portal 200 block. It's being presented by Mr. Mangayek. Nestor, welcome.
Hey, Nestor.
Thank you. So I do have a few slides just so we can get our bearings on the bottom. Yep.
Just a tester.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Nestor Mangohig. I'm the Senior Civil Engineer in Traffic Engineering, and I'm bringing the item, the consideration of speed cushions on the 200 block of West El Portal. Up on the screen is a aerial of West El Portal 200 block. It spans from Buena Vista to the west to Calle Oso to the east. West El Portal turns at a 90-degree into Calle Oso and also provides an access to Las Palmas Elementary School. El Portal is 40 feet curb to curb. Oso is 30 feet curb to curb. Now, in the beginning of 2019, the residents submitted a traffic calming petition. In the general traffic calming petition, staff collected data in spring, both when school was in and out of session, and the data indicated that the 85th percentile at the mid-block was 25 miles per hour when school was in session and 23 miles per hour when school was not in session. Volumes were just over 500 vehicles per day when school was in and about 360 vehicles per day when school was out. So we collected data including, we did a search for accident history, and based on nearby pedestrian generators as well as the lack of presence of sidewalks, we scored the street based on our traffic calming program criteria. This slide is actually one of the attachment exhibits in the report, but what it shows is that based on the traffic calming criteria, the street did not receive any points for speed, volume, or crash history, and that's recorded crash history by the Sheriff's Department. But it did receive 30 out of 30 points for the pedestrian generator and sidewalks or pathways categories. based on the school and the park nearby, as well as beach access and beach trail access. And the fact that there was no continuous sidewalk on both sides gave it 10 points. So based on the minimum requirement of 51 points, the street does not qualify for the traffic calming program. It received 30 points. But since the petition was specific to speed cushions, we also did take the data and compare it to the basic installation criteria in our speed hump and cushion program. And what this slide shows are the various criteria, and it doesn't meet two of them. The most notable is the speed criteria. The program calls out a 32 mile per hour speed limit. The 85th percentile speed for a segment. And as I had mentioned earlier, the street is 25 miles an hour school in session and 23 miles per hour school out of session. So it does not meet that. It marginally meets the volumes per day when school is in session, but not when it's out of session. You'll note that it also doesn't meet the segment minimum of 800 feet, but that is something that is under consideration as we're looking to revise our programs. That 800 feet is based on spacing criteria that we have listed now, and really with speed cushions, they can be spaced in different ways. And you look agency to agency, and you'll see a lot of different ranges, and we may revise certain things about our program in the near future. So based on not scoring the minimum for the point threshold and not meeting the basic criteria, staff is not recommending installation of speed cushions on West Del Portal. However, once I shared the information with the neighborhood contact, I did also mention the provision in the speed cushion program that mentions that if 2/3 of the residents do support the installation, despite their point scores, it will be brought forward to the Planning Commission for consideration, and that's why we're here tonight. So of note, we want to hear Planning Commission's input and discussion on this item, as well as the public input, because we see a distinction between this street and some others that have gone in the past, whereas in the past, the streets such as Riachuelo and Valencia Cristobal, they either met one or both of the traffic calming or the speed cushion criterias. This street is the first that we're bringing before you that doesn't meet either, but they do meet the 2/3 public support. So we'd like to get your input on that.
So they actually, right at 67%.
That's a couple
Yeah.
I believe it might be just over. It's very close.
How many houses are on the street? Do you know?
It's not as simple as houses. The way we looked at it is there are several multi-units on the street, and we did it based on ownership. So there are some condo parcels there, and then there are some single ownership that has multiple units. For our purposes, the way we used it, because we had that information readily available, was based on the ownership units. However, we did not require that an owner sign off. So we did have, however many number of parcels are in there, whether condo or single family, is the number that was used to make that calculation, and they met 2/3.
Okay. So, Esther, I go to a different elementary school, but one of the things that is a particular note to me when I look at this is the proximity to the school and the traffic counts. What that tells me, just because I encounter the gridlock every day at Truman Benedict, is if we're only seeing an increase of 150 cars roughly, I think if that math is right, for the school, we've got a lot of people walking to that school. Because we probably have, 400 or 500 cars, I think, that hit Truman during the school hours. And so if we're seeing that many people walking, I'm somewhat, I guess I can understand why 2/3 are petitioning for this, because we don't have sidewalks, right?
Not continuous, correct.
And so, I think about my little 10-year-old not paying attention when he should be, walking to school. Maybe 25 miles an hour is, maybe that's too low of or too high of a threshold for it to 32 when we're in some of these what I'd call special use zones, right? I mean, that's a little different than coming down Valencia, just because you don't have the, perhaps you don't have just the concentration of children.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that is also reflected in the point score of the traffic calming program. As you noted, it did max out on those two, because in terms of the the generators and the lack of continuous sidewalk. So I think when we revisit the plan, the speeds and the volumes, that's where you kind of, there's a lot of discretionary play in that.
Can you go back to
Sure.
that slide? So here's my concern as I look at this is, these points are, I know they're not arbitrary, but the value that you're weighting to this is, we have 2 kids that get hit by a car, all of a sudden it goes from 0 to 15 for crashes. Well, what if we could have done something to keep that at 0?
Well,
And
actually, that would bring it from 0 to 2, the way it's worded now, and those are the types of things.
Well, so, all right, so we have 50, so let's get really, it's just, I guess, I probably, that's the dad in me, right? I'm more cognizant of this around situations where it could get really bad. And so, standardized tests are great in times, and, matrices are great in times, but then discretion is something that should be exercised at times, too. So, that makes it very difficult for you to have a uniform policy, I apologize, but it makes sense.
I get that, and that's part of the discrepancy that we're trying to correct when we're revisiting that, because I think there are some neighborhoods that are on the brink that maybe, or that are lower that maybe are good candidates, and it doesn't necessarily capture that. But it's a tough one, because when you look at different programs at different cities, I think there's always going to be a street that might miss out, right? But that's the reason why we're bringing it to you, because the policy does allow us to bring it forward, and there's other factors involved in that, and it is discretionary at this point.
In one of my day jobs, right, we spend a lot of time trying not to solve for corner cases, right, because you'll just spin your wheels trying to solve for a corner case and to try to make it standardized. This is probably a corner case, and maybe you can't make a policy that solves for the corner cases, but you've created a mechanism that can bring it to a body that can make a discretionary decision. And so, I would argue maybe you've already kind of solved for some of those problems. Don't go waste a lot of time trying to solve for these arcane situations. Just, hey, if the residents want it and they see the problem, they're the best arbiters that there is a problem or could be a problem. That's just my input since you asked for it on that.
Thank you.
This will be a 20-page matrix that you use.
Some programs look like that.
Please don't bring that here.
I would like to point out, though, as I mentioned, that we are looking to retool the program and looking at ways of cleaning it up and revising it, whether it be by way of a study session or just just an item where we come to you with recommendations. That is something that we're going to be bringing back to you.
Oh, I would love that. I can't believe I'm saying I'd love a study session in traffic. God,
Well,
I never thought I'd say that.
we get enough of these, yeah.
Those are important, I think. This could save lives.
And that's another reason why we're here, because not only in terms of West Portal and how, if we recommend, if you do decide to recommend to the council, we will take it to the council with your recommendation, but also because there are some other streets that are in queue, and whether we decide to, bring potential revision forward first, or we bring the streets that are in queue, some of them have lower volumes, some of them have lower speeds. So I know that, as you'd mentioned, there are other factors involved, and maybe that's a different case because they're not next to a school, and then that's its own scenario that you need to consider. But there are likely some others that may be coming in front of you that are similar in that they don't meet either, but they've got the 2/3.
Okay. We have people that want to talk on this.
Yeah, I have some question. Lester, can you show me the map or satellite image?
The map, this map?
Mm-hmm. Is there a walk-to-school route here?
Well, the walk-to-school route from the west side, El Portal, is just a route that doesn't have a sidewalk. I mean, there were different projects that were done. I think some were CDBG, and I think that might come up later in terms of potential for sidewalk. You have the street to the north that's also, I believe, has continuous sidewalk, but kids use this street. There's not a question of that, and it's not continuous.
It's not continuous.
It's not a continuous sidewalk,
No,
so
no,
there's
that one side,
sections of
it's all dirt.
sidewalk, and then they'll break it driveways, and there's
Right.
the portion right next to the school, or adjacent to the school property that has none at all.
Yeah,
This El Porto,
Right, so it's piecemeal.
so this street El Porto is identified as a walk-to-school route? There are alternative street, for example, the Avenida del Poniente, does it have continuous sidewalk?
Poniente, I believe, does not. It has a similar situation where you come to driveways, and the driveways, you have long stretches of driveways, and then I believe there are also parcels that don't. So on our maps, I don't know that in this area, I don't think we don't show any restriction, like some maps will show, here's where we want you to walk and don't want you to walk. I don't think we have any from this direction that say don't walk on El Portal, for example.
Well, from a trip generation standpoint, how many kids are coming to school from this direction, using this road?
El Portal? Well, in looking at the ADT information, I noticed that those 150 or so trips, about 100 or just under 100 were captured in the morning. And then the other 50, 60 or whatever were captured in the afternoon. So that's 100
That's
trips
a
would be-
vehicle trip.
That's vehicle trips.
What about the pedestrian?
I don't have the pedestrian numbers there. No, the way that we calculated and maxed out the pedestrian numbers there was based on generators. So we're assuming there is pedestrian activity and that there's potential for pedestrian activity. For example, if you put in a facility, you may see more pedestrian activity just because of the access to the coast to the beach on the west there, at the end of the block, and then just the school and the park on the east. So we're assuming there's a considerable amount of activity there.
Okay.
Chair Blackwell, you have any more, are you done? You have more questions?
I'm done.
Kurt Blackwell, may I?
Yes, please.
See, this area has always been, particular street as well, and we have to, I think, look at it in a more integrated approach here, because it's all driven by the school. And you bring up a very valid point. Is this a route to school? Well, there's a drop-off point in that parking lot. In other words, people drive up that street in the morning, and they go through the parking lot of the school and drop their kids off. And it gets really jammed up there. So that's one of the drop-off. There's drop-off points, I think, one on the west side of the school and, of course, up on the park in the front of the school. And they do a lot of management up there in the front. So this whole area gets clouded by the fact of the school. And it's shocking that we haven't been able to get a safe route to school grant of some sort to complete the sidewalks back here on the street, El Portal. This is if you've ever been over there in the morning, 8:30 before they're out there, when the school forms up and they have an assembly on the outside a couple of days a week. This is an absolute gridlock about 8:30 in the morning when school, everybody's trying to get to school. And kids are, trying to get out of their car and everything else. So it's a accident waiting to happen from a safe route to school standpoint. So I'm troubled because the numbers are low on calming, but the fact that we don't have continuous sidewalks, the fact we have a school drop-off point as you make the 90-degree turn, onto Calioso there. And I don't know, if the school should move that drop-off point or there's better management of it, but to me, that's an accident waiting to happen about an hour a day in the morning and maybe, or whenever it is in the afternoon. So this is a tough problem. We don't generate the trips speed-wise for calming when in really fact they need safe route to school type funding to make continuous sidewalks. Maybe the school should change their drop-off point to another side, or I don't know. But the driver of this, to me, is the school. And I've always been very concerned about the backside of that school. If you ever go over there about 8 o'clock in the morning, you'd be surprised how jammed that whole area is down around that whole turn.
But if the traffic is jammed, they're not moving at 25 miles an hour.
No, they're not. They're moving slow. And then kids start jumping out of the cars and running up the street because they got to make assembly on time.
Right.
And now you got kids with backpacks, trying to work their way up.
So what does a speed bump or hump help here?
Huh?
how can a speed bump help here? You slow down the traffic, but in the most important time of the day,
We're not doing public comment.
they're traveling
it's a very good point.
very slowly.
It's a very good point.
Well, let's save our discussion for,
Anyway.
when we have to go into discussion. But, so questions of Nestor, any further questions?
Has the school been approached about any of their drop-off points and their traffic management?
Drop-off points, yeah, there, actually, we had an item in front of you maybe a year and a half ago where we added some red curb because we worked with the school and tried
Remember
to
that.
free up some of that, that bend there. So around that north side of the bend, we added some red curb, and that was in working with the school. And for all the schools that we worked with, typically the school's position is anything that would make things safer around their property, adjacent, that would make it safer, they're in support of. And a lot of times that doesn't come with a specific recommendation for a particular item, but they always take the safety stance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nestor. I appreciate that. And go ahead and enter into discussion on the item. I just would like to say that the points are valid. You know, we're talking about, safety for the kids. Pardon me? Oh, we do. Oh, yes, we do. Thank you. I put them all the way over there. Okay, so I'd like to open this up for public comment. We've got two speakers. The first is...
I get 10 minutes.
Are you Helen?
Yes.
Helen.
I was a petitioner.
Helen McHugh?
Yes.
Helen McHugh. Thank you for speaking.
I could have answered some of Nestor's, whatever this is. Nestor's really been a big help with the people on our street. I just have a few comments. I started this back in 2011 through Akron. Then we went to, I think it was Frank, and now it's Nestor. And in 2011, the street had about 8 kids on the street. Then it drastically dropped to hardly any. But in the last 2 years, the population of kids have blossomed. About 12 kids down at the end, babies, teenagers, pre-teenagers, and most of them do go to Las Palmas except for the little ones. I don't know how many of you have driven, Mr. Brown has, on Oso and Las Palmas. It is a disaster. 7:45, there's the mothers and fathers going down West El Portal. Kids are unbuckling, the parents are drinking coffee, whatever else in the car. And as soon as they see the 15 miles an hour, they slow down to make the curve. Then they go into the school parking lot. They drop their kids off. They can only make a right-hand turn back onto Oso and West Portal. As soon as they hit West Portal, they're gone down to Buena Vista 50 miles an hour, even though it doesn't show on the testing machine. At 12:30 on Tuesday, it repeats. At 3 o'clock or 2:30, Monday through Friday, it's the same disaster. I call the cops all the time. They won't go down there. Sometimes the cars are located all the way on Cañada parking to get into the drop-off and pickup area. If there's a fire or an accident, no one's going to get through, none of the safety. But once those parents leave Oso, they go down West Portal so fast, they just want to get out of there. It is a disaster. I was looking at the speed limit. The day that they installed it, I think they didn't install it in a very good place. The second week, the street sweeper came by and ripped it up. Janie said, well, that didn't make any difference, but I think it did. It shorted out the cord across the street. So it could be the volume wasn't good that week or the speed. Then they take it during spring break. The only people going there are the surfers. 204 is one of the most popular surfing places. We now have that nice beach stairs. We have more people parking on our street, going down to the beach, or walking from Kenyatta. It is a very trafficky street. We have surfers, we have residents, we have dog walkers. And that's the bad part. So many people, they walk out in the middle of the street because there's no sidewalk, no continuous sidewalk. And if at least we could have some means of slowing down the traffic, maybe someone wouldn't get hurt. I was looking at some of the reports on the 3 other street calming. Oh boy, I hope I didn't lose that. On Valencia, they did not mention any accidents. Their traffic was 30 to 35 on, I don't know how you say that street out.
Cistobal?
No, the other one, Rucella. They did their numbers of cars 200 to 600. So why are they breaking their rules, even though their speeds may be high? And they're forcing us to go by these rules of speed, volume, and then crashes. The one last night that was Cistobal, there was a bad accident there. We had accidents on our street. The police will not respond unless there's an injury. So how can we mark crashes if the police won't even come? And I know of several. And a lot of times people just exchange insurance cards. One car was on its side a couple years ago, and the 4 people hopped out and put the car back on the wheels and left before the cops even got there. So I think some of these survey things should be a little bendable. And then on ours, we only got 30 points, but there was no mention of discretionary factors. That wasn't put down there at all. So we didn't even get any points for that. And we should have. Also, when we started this process, it was 50 people, 50%. And then Nestor called me and said we had to have 67. So I had to redo the whole signature process again. And then I called him and I said, I got the 67%. Then he said, well, there's a little bit of a change because he gave me the parcel number that where there was some condominium, so I had to go back and get some more signatures. I could have had 100% of every resident on that street, except for 4 vacant lots, and I had no idea how to contact those people. So I think for safety, for the citizens, for the children, and for the walkers, the dog walkers, everybody who goes up our street, I think, and I wish you would push this to the city council. And one other thing, when you talk about the that SAFE program.
Safe Routes to School.
Yeah, we had, our street was supposed to have sidewalks. Somehow that money was moved onto Puente. Puente already had a sidewalk, and now they have a sidewalk on both sides of the street. So I don't know how the money got misappropriated, but I hope you take all these comments into consideration and push this towards the city council. One death, that's all we need. And I would hate to say what would happen to the city if you ignore that. I hate to even put that pressure on you, but if we can save one life, and he asked what would the speed cushions do because of the cars slowing down. They don't slow down. Once they hit Oso, they're gone. And once they see that going this way, they see the 15 miles because of the curve, they slow down. And I think around schools, every school, the speed limit should be 15. I can't understand why we have 25 miles an hour around a school.
Okay.
I think that should be changed.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Do appreciate it. Okay. Thank you, Helen. Our next speaker is Mike DeSanti to speak on the speed cushions. And are we doing 3 minutes?
Yeah. 3 minutes
We are.
is fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak for the commission. I just wanted to address a couple of the issues here to Commissioner Wu's question about jamming of the traffic in that area. What the Las Palmas School does is they put out a newsletter every year, and they do it on a weekly basis, but one of those is to remind students and parents where to drop off. So as you can see on Cayoso there's a parking lot. Per the school's requirement or recommendation is that all cars that are traveling from the westbound side go up go up El Portal down here at the bottom, turn onto Cayoso, and also from Cañada on the other side, turn into Cayoso, go through the parking lot in a horseshoe, and as they exit out back onto Cayoso, the only exit is supposed to be down West El Portal. So once the kids are dropped off, after they've waited in line all morning to try and get their kids off to school, they come down Cayoso, make that 90-degree turn, and once they kind of come around the bend, they lay on the gas. And that's where the danger is where the kids are rushing to school, parents are rushing to get to work, they're back on their phones with their coffees, you see it all the time. And I walk my child to school, I live at 238 West El Portal, and I have a kindergartner, and I have to drop him off every day directly. But when he has to walk to school by himself, as he gets older and he's allowed to, it's going to be dangerous walking up and down that street. But I've stopped, and for the most part, when we walk up in the school in the morning, we walk on the right-hand side where the eastbound traffic would go up El Portal, just because the westbound traffic is so fast. And on numerous occasions, I've asked them to step to the side, and I've waved down the people who are driving, 30, 40 miles an hour, just kind of, hey, what are you doing? Slow down, this is a residential area. So it's early in the morning, kids are getting dropped off, and it's just I'd hate to see something terrible happen. And there are a lot of children that use that street. The parking around the area in the front of the school, there's a lot of children that need to get dropped off everywhere. So every street is taken, and the street above us has that continuous sidewalk, but that's where a lot of cars park because it's easy to park there, or those spaces get taken, so they go to the next street, and then they'll park on El Portal, they'll park on Del Poniente if you could find a space, and walk their children to school. So yes, from the westbound side, there is a lot of a lot of kids that walk from that area. So I think yep. Thanks for your time, guys.
Commissioner Brown, did you have a question of the speaker?
Yeah, just to clarify the drop-off points for Las Palmas.
Okay.
There are two up in the front, as I recall, one on the west side and this one in the back. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. And so the one in the back is for students who get dropped off in the car without a chaperone into the school. They also do it in the front as well.
Now, do they have parking like managers or traffic directors on the front of the school?
No, in the front of the school, yes, I believe they do.
And on the west side?
In the front of the school, in front of the park, there is somebody there moving people through the white
They have vests on, and they're moving people through the queue.
Yeah,
what I'm saying is they manage the drop-off points.
On Calle Puente, I believe, is that the one that fronts the park there? Yeah.
Do they manage this one in the back?
The only manager in the back is stationed inside of the parking lot itself, and nobody is outside of the lot when that turn happens on Oso Parkway, or excuse me, on Calle Oso.
They're making sure everybody turns right?
There's nobody that makes you turn right.
Because I've been down there and somebody just has to go left. And then
They do, yeah, you see it all the time.
And the whole place goes nuts. I mean,
Yeah.
it goes to gridlock.
Yeah.
And
It's not a very
a
wide
good friend
street.
of mine lives right at the end of the street up there where Oso runs into Puente, and Chris Taylor's a real estate guy, and he surfs at T Street.
All right.
And so anyway, so I just want to make sure that they sort of manage the lot in the back, but the school.
The idea is to
Could they do
see.
a better job of managing it in the back?
Yeah, you know what, they could do a better job. One of the things that I had asked for is I actually went and saw the principal and asked for her to identify El Portal in writing in her newsletter to, please slow down when you exit via this school, directly, put that in your newsletter when you're assigning traffic, routes. And she didn't necessarily put El Portal and spell it out, but she notified that all, reminding drivers that all streets around the school should be observed, the traffic speed.
Okay.
Mr. Brown?
I'm so sorry, yes, we've already had the moment to speak. Okay.
Well, I just wanted to clarify about the parking gap.
I have a question for staff. When we did the Cistobal thing last night, you'd got some data from the sheriff's department, like the 200 block, there'd been 9 accidents in the last 10 years, and then 8 or 9 on the 100 block. You got data from the sheriff's department.
Correct, and they were from the sheriff, and not all of them were injury.
Right.
But they were recorded by.
They were reportable accidents.
It was about one a year, sometimes more than one a year.
But
on the
there's no
200.
similar data from El Portal or Oso from the sheriff's department?
There's no recorded data in the last 3.5 years. Recorded data.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and close the public comment period and open this up for discussion. Yes, Commissioner Talley.
So I just want to respond to the second speaker's comment, and maybe my fellow Commissioner Brown here. As I mentioned, I go to Truman Benedict and now BAMS, and we've had traffic issues down there. And one of the things that I have discovered is that the Capital Unified School District is very hesitant for them to try to go out and do any type of traffic involvement outside of the actual school zone, right? So getting out on the street or doing things like that, at least at Truman, that was a big no-no. And to the point where they actually, even though there was a public park above that, they made them withdraw the people that they were utilizing up on a public park because that wasn't on quote-unquote school property. So I think part of this problem here is the school is somewhat handicapped by some of their policies, but I also make the comment that the cars that are coming down Portal, the thing that kind of concerns me a little bit, driving an electric car now, is that the acceleration is really, really quick, right? So it used to be you'd have to have a little bit of a roadway to get some speed up, but I can get up to 35 miles per hour in less than a second, right? You hit the electrons, right? So well, only on La Plata. But I think that's a strong enough road or long enough road segment, and I observe similar patterns at my school where it just becomes crazy. People just lose their mind around the school. I don't know why. I'm in support of recommending to the City Council to put speed cushions on this. I think that makes sense.
Okay, Commissioner Wu was next.
Nesta, do you recognize there's a traffic problem here or not?
I recognize in the totality of, I have 2 kids in elementary as well, and I know that during certain hours, it is gridlocked. And to your point, that gridlock corner, people don't get to speed, but you do notice that people speed, and I think it's because they're leaving that situation and they've been stuck in a line, they get up to speed. That being said, the volumes that we collected, they're accurate. There was a portion when the tubes were cut, but we're able to tell when a tube is cut or when a tube is being parked on, so we exclude all those days and we will reinstall. So the 25 and 23 is what it is. In terms of, is that fast compared to some other streets that we've seen? It's not. But I know the sensitivities around a school are different when you're dealing with children of this age.
Okay, thank you. This is the second time Planning Commission talked about the school and traffic related. I think last time it was block out a segment of the street from parking, right?
It was around the bend of
Was
Oso.
there any consideration about, does it have to be 25 miles per hour? I know the speed, the local speed is not, the speed limit is not determined by the road design. It's just a posted speed. Can we lower the speed limit, just put it at 15 miles per hour on the street?
For the actual speed limit as opposed to that warning speed of 15 miles per hour, there is a provision in the vehicle code that allows a city to adopt that for school areas. To my knowledge, we haven't pursued that around any of the schools, and I don't know if there's, I do know from other agencies there's sometimes a hesitancy to do that, depending on the area, because, you know, enforcement, what it is, and a lot of times it's going to be a sign that goes unenforced, and it now seems like a bigger issue because people are going to be going over 15 just by coasting, and then now you got all these people violating the law because they're going 16, 17 miles an hour. But to answer your question, there is a provision to do that, but it takes a city council approval and also a resolution to make that happen in the per code.
Well, what about implementing a one-way policy during school on and off time? Is that
A one-way policy during school?
Yeah.
I think that is,
let's say, the school starts, whatever, for an hour, where the street is the most congested, and we say it's a one-way street. Does that work?
well, we can consider that. I tried to look at this separate in terms of cushions because we had very specific criteria, but Ms. McHugh did bring that up as a possibility, not as, I don't believe it was brought up as a possibility during 1 or 2 hours of the school, but just what it would take to make it a one-way section, period, because we talked about streets, I think in the last year and a half or so, we did another, just off of East El Portal, I forget what it was, but the discussion we had was in order to do that, we need to have a bigger community forum because we'd have to invite the other parallel streets that might take that traffic away. So that's not off the table, but it'd need to go through its own process.
Okay, thank you.
I think, when you think about that one-way street on El Portal, and then reverse it every couple hours, that could, I think, would be more confusing when,
That would be problematic to try to do it per time.
Let's keep it simple, you know, the KISS program here.
Make it
but,
one-way permanent.
But then again, that would negate your flow through the parking lot. You have to reverse the flow so that they come out, turn left on Oso, and then go on to Puente and
No, I
on
think
their way.
the desire was to, if it was one way, to make it flow westbound.
Okay, and so they would go down Puente, turn right on Oso through the parking lot, and then leave.
Like they do
via
today,
El
make
Portal.
that right, but then what that would reduce are the eastbound vehicles that kind of clog up the area more so because they're making that turn on
It's
the
gonna
bend.
clog up
But
El
they would have to
Puente.
come up one of the parallel streets, and that's when you need to involve those streets in that
You'd
discussion.
clog up El Puente for sure, I think you would.
Because it's still not clear if everyone on El Portal would be agreeable to that in the first place, because that changes your patterns. If you live on either one of those ends of the street, it can make things very inconvenient. And I can just imagine that trying to get a consensus or even a two-thirds might take a lot of discussion.
But the people that live there want this.
The cushions, yes.
If you were to put speed cushions in, where would you put them? Would you put two sets in, one set? Where would you position them?
Initially, I was thinking two sets. The length of street from Buena Vista to the bend is about 750. So I thought that unless someone really...
The one-third rule?
Oh, yeah, exactly, yeah. Unless there was a lot of objection, but we'll deal with that later.
Okay, thank you. I'm a conundrum about this because I know the numbers aren't there, but then I've spent some time over there. You know, when I'm on the Boys and Girls Club board, and I was executive board. So I spent a lot of time at that school because we get a lot of, we have 2 busloads come from that school each day down to the Boys and Girls Club. So I did a lot of interface with the principal and been around up there for they have the Hispanic PTA and the whole bit, and I've seen that whole back. that whole back area, from a safe route to school standpoint, is probably one that frightens me more than any school in this town. I guess I could support the speed cushions on El Portal, even though the numbers aren't there, but that is still, to me, only a part of the solution. I mean, we could recommend this to council, but I'd really like a sense of the commission that somebody's got to really get a priority on safe routes. This place needs sidewalks. It needs meetings with the PTA and the school of how they manage their drop-off point in the back. Because I know they put people in the streets in the front to get people going through there. I mean, as a mother, you park in front of that school, your kids are out of there and there's people waving you on. They're trying to get cars safely through the system up there, but it's monitored in the front of the school.
That's what they attempt to do in that back lot, is that you have a person that's trying to get the cars to keep moving forward and not create.
So they are managing the drop-off point itself?
On property, though, not at the exit.
Got a question.
So, I mean,
When he's done.
to me, this is only part of the answer, and which is not on it before us tonight, but I would like to include, if we do go forward to the council, a strong, urgent message that they secure safe route to school funding for sidewalks and other improvements in the area back there. It's going to be it's an accident waiting to happen during and the school drives it, I think. Enough.
All right, great. Commissioner Talley.
So, first of all, I support the safe route to school codicil to the amendment if we want to pass something on to council. But something that Nestor said earlier that I think this is kind of a good test case for is if we push this to council, I think we're going to get a pretty good idea of what council is considering on these edge cases, right? Because at the end of the day, if council doesn't want to hear it unless they meet the thresholds, then we're wasting a lot of staff's time and our time considering these edge cases. So I kind of this one feels like it's a good litmus test to see if the council is willing to stray from the design guidelines that they've put forward with traffic, and I get to see some meaningful input back that we can then relay to Nestor and your team, right, going forward. I kind of view this as okay, let's see what they say. I mean, here's the recommendation, and now
Well, we got to make that point that there's some exception. There's exceptional reasons for this.
Well, of course there are exceptional reasons. That's well covered in the minutes and the safe route to school. But if you're not going to deviate from the policy, this is probably one that is easier to deviate from the policy than others.
That's why this one is in front of you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and chime in on this too. I know that Nestor is active, not just obviously on this project, but at other schools. Nestor is working with community members, concerned parents, school people, district people, to find ways to improve the situation, get the kids into routes that are safe. And I agree. This is one part of a larger plan that I think would be a lot more effective. And I would definitely support adding some language in there. If Nestor could put together something into the recommendation that would address that, but not just for this school, but just citywide as well. I mean, it's important. We need to really put energy into this. I mean, we've got problems. We've got issues here that are that we're all aware of, dangerous situations for the kids, and we should make every effort to fix those problems. And this is, I definitely stand behind this one and the recommendation, pushing it forward. I think we can do that, but there needs to be more to it. I know we're just looking at the speed humps right now. But it also, I think there's some benefit to having, parents that are active. For example, Vista Del Mar has parents that are putting together programs that ensure safety for the kids. So it's a comprehensive approach to this. It's, parents, dads are out there walking in the morning, making sure that the kids are safe, and there's no, strangers walking into campus. There's eyes and ears that are out there We're adjusting streetlight timing. We're looking at, improving crosswalks, widening sidewalks. I mean, these are all things that can be looked at. Not everything can be done, but the discussion has already started, and this isn't, this isn't the end for this one, clearly. So hopefully we can get some more meat on the recommendation. And do you have any language that I saw you writing down, anything that came to mind?
I'm taking note of everyone's main points. I'm going to try to summarize all that because
Okay.
you recall that our recommendation, because of the points, was not to move it forward or to not install. So that's what we're gonna reiterate that. But then if Planning Commission should choose to recommend, then we'll try to create a bullet item list of the various things that I've heard. I'll have to rewatch it because there's a lot of points being made.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's a great, fantastic report, very technical. I know a lot of work goes into this, a lot of, time on site, doing traffic counts, meeting with people. There's a lot to this, so greatly appreciate it, for the kids and their safety. It's critical. So do I have a feel from the commission for a motion?
Did you want to say something?
Oh, sorry. I didn't see your light.
A little
Yes.
comment.
Yes, please.
If it were a typical residential, when the points are so much below the threshold, I would side with our engineer. Given the fact that this is related to the school and the lack of a safe route to the school, I'd like to support this one as a temporary solution, but I think we do need a push for the safe route to school, and that would be that's a real solution. This is just, we'll put it there, do an experiment, see if it works. If it doesn't work, we can take it out, but I support it for now.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we forward to the City Council this body's recommendation that we implement the speed cushions as described by Nestor on a 200 block of West El Portal. And we also strongly recommend to the City Council that it work hard on a safe route for school for not only this school and this route, but also to evaluate that across the city.
I think it's critical to this school, right?
I think it's critical to this school. I concur. But I understand engineering side, but I kind of feel like you want us to support this to council, so I hope you'll highlight our comments in bold.
Okay, that's it.
A second?
Yeah, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 4-0.
I apologize, gentlemen, but I have a very early morning tomorrow, and I've got to depart. And so, I understand, we won't have a quorum, that'll just have to get continued to the next meeting.
Thank you.
So, I apologize, but I would be not doing it justice if I had a 5-minute conversation on that, so I hope that's acceptable.
So we have to continue this Capistrano Shores.
Is that okay with the city attorney?
Okay, so we would, I have to call it, right?
Well,
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
well,
So I'm going to call it.
Until she says you can.
Do you want to stay and continue this item? And then
Would
you
you
can all
prefer
vote
to
on it
continue it?
and then just adjourn?
instead of me
That's a
giving
great
it-
I have to
idea.
call it
Why don't we
anyway,
do that?
so.
Okay, so.
Okay, so let's do
call it
that.
and Continue it, okay.
Okay, under new business, item 9B is a transfer of a 4 by 325 foot, 1,300 square foot portion of Senda de la Playa to the Capistrano Shores Mobile Park.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we continue this item to the next regularly scheduled business meeting of this body.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion is continued.
Okay.
Do we have it, do we need to a date?
You can actually adjourn it without a motion.
can't
So you're okay adjourning it but on your own.
Why
Okay.
don't we,
We just, yeah, we can just go through the whole thing.
Okay.
Just
see,
a
it's
couple minutes.
all, you want me to motion to adjourn? I'll read it.
Okay. Well, we have old business, none. Reports of commissioners' staff, any?
No.
None, we have none. Okay, we're going on to adjournment.
I move that we adjourn the joint council committee commissions meeting, which will be held on Tuesday, October 29th from 5:30 to 9 at the Wedgewood and San Clemente Municipal Golf Course located at 150 East Avenida Magdalena, San Clemente, California. And I further move that we adjourn to the next regular meeting of the study session and planning commission, which will be held on November 6, 2019, at 6 p.m. Council chambers located at 100 Avenida Presidio, San Clemente, California.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
I'm in
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.